Welcome to the podcast for the Everyday Nerd Podcast. It's your boy Lou P, along with Marvin and the very lovely Jocelyn. We're here today to talk about, as you can see on my background, Marv's background, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Yes, we're up to Volume 3. And of course, when it comes to our podcast, I always gotta break down the money if you're an MCU movie. So in the first weekend, and this is going to sound funny, but it is true. It was one of the movies that did lower than the usual summer release for the MCU. It only took, this just sounds funny when I say it, it only took 118.4 million in the first weekend. But coming into the second weekend, right, which is this time of our recording right now, it's recorded to have 58 million, which would be the second best second weekend post pandemic since Shang-Chi. So I guess Guardians is doing it. It kind of started slow, but then now it's kind of making its comeback. But it's, before we get into the movie, and we'll touch on this a little, we'll make this quick. I think, let me ask you guys this. Has it gotten to the point now where it's comic fatigue, where folks are now just kind of tired of it because it's no longer the Thors, the Captain Americas, the Avenger, the guys that we quote unquote know? There's no longer this big push for, a new Marvel movie's out, let's go to the theater. It seems to kind of died. I'd like to have your thoughts. So Marv, go ahead.
I think it's a combination of things. One, I think there is a little bit of fatigue, but I think we also have to realize, and like I said, I'm not deriding Marvel here, but let's face it, in the middle of all this, we have had some subpar comic book movies coming out in the meantime. So while they may not have the Marvel brand, it's still superheroes, and the only thing that can kill the momentum of, regardless of fatigue or not. I mean, we've had the argument that comic book superhero fatigue has been happening even when the MCU started. But I think especially in the latter days of Phase 3, when it started to get really, really, really big. Like I said, no one was coming close, but then now we're starting to see these other studios, like I said, they're releasing subpar material, which, it's not Marvel, but it is affecting Marvel. And also, even on the Marvel side, I will admit, some of their recent stuff hasn't been doesn't hit as hard as it has in the past. But I think also spreading the material to Disney Plus, it gives me personally, I like having a glut of material. I personally like it, but I could understand. But for some people, it's just too much to keep track of. But yeah, I think it goes down to there's a lot of subpar material trying to do the same thing, and sometimes Marvel can be the victim of it.
Joss?
Okay, so with this Guardian, so I have to give a disclaimer. I did not watch the first two Guardians movie. I wasn't a fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy, like those first two movies. I know, surprise. So the most exposure that I've had with the characters is through the collaboration with the Avengers and the Endgames. And so through that venue, I was able then to understand, the base of the characters. And then I heard, the fillers as far as like who the father is and Rocket, and then why Groot was just a baby and now he's a teenager. So I got all that. So this was actually the first Guardians movie I actually watched in its full length. I think that was fine. Considering, I think I'm okay with going back to the other Guardians and just getting a glimpse of about the Infinity Stones and just learning from them. But just for this movie itself, again, this was like a post Endgame movie. It was like we've also said goodbye to Thor when Thor had his movie early on and he separated from the Guardians. And so from here, how I felt about it is I actually enjoyed it. You know, it's interesting the way I came about the story. Like I said, I didn't have the background. I knew what it was, but here I am, seeing it from after the end game and how Gamora doesn't even have memory of her relationship, with Peter. Also, thanks to the Disney Plus holiday special, I understood that yeah, that Peter and, oh, help me out with her
Mantis.
name.
Mantis.
Mantis, thank you. That they're brother and sister. I kind of wonder, like, where'd that come from? But I figure it's probably from like another movie. So, it was I think I had enough foundation to understand the character in itself. And so, with the story itself, I thought it was, like I said, it was pretty good. I like getting the background of Rocket, so I'm kind of glad that I got a little bit of more of his take and understand his character. And I thought he was a very well-rounded character. Um, with, like you said, with the abuse that he had, and he was actually designed to be this perfect specimen. And then with the reality that his maker realized he actually succeeded and he wanted him back. So, it was all about power for him and to just make this perfect colony, and I guess utilizing Rocket for those abilities and then disposing him. So there really was this callous, I think the maker, he's just very callous with, he took on and kidnapped all these animals plus children. Can you imagine what he would do with this? And like you said, he was playing God. um but again, just with the overall movie, I like the fact that they were there to save Rocket. That's all it meant, to them. That was the most important thing. It was like their family, we're gonna go get our family. And then when Gamora came in, I felt like a little bit she was able to kind of feel maybe what it was like for her when she was part of them. But yet I was also satisfied that at the end she didn't go back to Peter and they decided for her to go her own route, and continue to be a scavenger. And that, with the different, they didn't really have a battle per se. It's just trying to get Rocket back. um I thought it was good. I mean, I could picture the images, and also, as a family, they have become a family, so they're like picking up after each other, taking care of someone when he's just inebriated to the core. It's just, there's this all this brother sisterly love that you can relate, that hey, this is your family. So I thought it was good in that sense. And just the reason why they're fighting, it's not for yeah, it's fighting of like good versus evil towards the end, but that was to me more of a subplot. It was more of like, hey, let's get our family back. Let's get Rocket. Let's get him alive. Um, and like just how much each other means to them after all they've been through. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that, because their main goal in the movie, they're not trying to save the world. They just want to save their family member. And I appreciated that, because we see all these movies where all the heroes, they have to try to save the world. They're like, no, this one's a little more personal. I mean, they happen to save people at the end, but that wasn't their main goal. That wasn't what they were trying to do. They wanted to save a member of their family that was dying. And I also want to add to a lot of what you said, especially about the Gamora and Peter Quill stuff, because I think at its core, this movie is about relationships. And we see different aspects of it. And the Gamora and Peter Quill one's interesting in the sense that, yeah, this isn't the Gamora that Peter Quill fell in love with. So, this is an example of what happens when you place expectations on a person. He's expecting this woman that isn't the same woman as he fell in love with to fall in love with her all over again. But they didn't have the shared experience that that he had with the previous Gamora. And you could see it was troubling him. And and then by the end of the day, he finally accepted, okay, you're not her. It's all right.
Right.
But
I agree with you too with that. So the way and it kind of showed like in the beginning he was still depressed over her because that was his big love, and the fact that she's no longer there. But it was humorous in the way where he's still trying to get at her
yeah,
when they came connected, and she's like, who is this guy? But for a moment there, when he was off trying to save Rocket and she was left in the ship, I kind of felt like, did she remember something? Did she sense that there was this strong connection between them? But after he's been realizing that, well, her personality is so much different, he's like, well, my Gamora wouldn't start shooting people and killing people, um but I think he accepted, he acknowledged, and I think there's a sense of closure for him to realize that yes, she is gone. No, we can't just get this back, and so it's just a sense for him to move on, and that's what I got.
We were talking earlier, and I put it in perspective like this. Endgame was like you're seeing, okay, and I know some folks wouldn't know this group. This just sounds funny to say for me to say, but it would be like Endgame was the Beatles performing their final concert, or for some of you, Beyonce doing her final concert, or Janet. See, even Janet Jackson, maybe
well,
Jennifer
guess what?
Lopez.
The Rolling Stones just announced they're doing their
They're
final
doing another
tour.
tour, right? But just the final show of this great act, and all of a sudden you've seen the show, you love the show, it was a perfect ending. Then all of a sudden the lights go on, you think you're done, and all of a sudden the lights go back down, and here comes this new group. You heard about them, you're like, oh, that's so and so. Oh yeah, they're associated with the Beatles a little bit, or Beyonce, or whoever the act was that just highlighted, but they're not that act. And I think Endgame was that. Endgame was the act that, wow, it finished off. It was the 10-year arc. It was perfect. Now, Marv, you mentioned it earlier. I think what people need to understand is that it's a buildup again. We have to rebuild we have to rebuild this new storytelling of what Marvel's doing now with new characters, new younger characters. Some are familiar, some aren't so familiar. And I think that's what leads to this success, and I'm doing that with the air quotes, of what happens in the box office. If it's, characters that people really know and are interested in, then you'll have more people there. But I think right now, like we said, especially coming off pandemic, coming off now new material, new stories that people aren't so familiar with, well, you know what? I think Marvel needs to lower those expectations of making so much money on opening weekend and how much they make at the end, because I know Disney's expecting to make amount X, but now they might have to lower that a little bit now because of the of factors we just discussed. And what's great about this movie is obviously spoiler alerts. So if you haven't seen the movie, you could get into our discussion that we just had, comment on the bottom right there. But if you haven't seen the movie right now, stop the podcast, watch the movie, and come back at this point because we're going to talk about this movie and the villain in the movie, the High Evolutionary. It's interesting. And what's cool about this movie is you got to finally see Rocket's origins. You kind of, because I know a lot of folks were wondering, oh, how did this character come about? And we just finished talking about, and here's something I want to say before we dive back into this movie. Let's all remember, folks, the Guardians of the Galaxy were part of the earlier phases in the MCU. So I kind of like how what we just finished talking about, these new characters stuff, the Guardians are kind of still the last characters you remember from the earlier phases. So it's the way this movie went, in my opinion, was a perfect way to end this phase of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But let's talk about why it was perfect way to end this phase of the Guardians. So we're talking about the High Evolutionary. Now, what's interesting about this character, Marv, what I found interesting is that, yeah, he's like a god. He feels like he's a god. He needs everything to be perfect. And Marv, can you break down a little more about the character of the High Evolutionary? I want you to tell us.
Well,
You
part
got
of his
the comic
name, his
background.
name is pretty much self-explanatory. He's about evolution. He's all about trying to find the perfect form. And as you see in those movies, it's the same way in the comics. He goes through very sick methods to find that form, sick and dastardly methods to try to find it. But yeah, it's I don't own pets, but I can only imagine how animal lovers were feeling watching this movie,
Mhm,
because especially when we started getting those flashbacks of Rocket,
mhm.
with his friends, and the first word he says is hurts, and it, like I said, I'm not an animal person, but I can I can only imagine how that felt.
Well,
So
being
I don't know
yeah,
how. I mean, I know you have dogs. I'm wondering
yes.
how this movie made you feel as when you see somebody torturing animals. And we'll get more into this quote unquote interesting relationship with High Evolutionary and Rocket Raccoon. But
Mhm.
how did you feel as somebody, you own dogs? How did you feel watching this?
I gotta admit, me and the wife were tearing up. I can speak for me, but just the fact the scenes where you see what the High Evolutionary is doing to all these animals, and I was just like, I teared up because it's like, yeah, but before I'll admit this something, Marv, before I got dogs, I would have been like, I'd have been like, man, that's messed up. But it really moved me because of the fact that I do have pets. I do have dogs. And I'm sure a lot of the pet owners and the animal, like you said, a lot of the animal lovers out there, you're gonna be tearing up when you're watching this movie. We don't want to get into too many details about what was going on, I don't think, but just the fact that you could already guess with the High Evolutionary what he was doing. He was obvious, and this is the thing. This is something that I hate to say it. Humans have been doing for years. They've been taking animals and they've been testing them for the latest vaccine, the latest this, the latest cure for this. They would test animals to do this before they give it to humans. And so, in a way, what we saw with the High Evolutionary is uh, kind of like a role of what humans in society tend to be when it comes to animals, the superior being in this world that we live in, that we could take other beings and experiment with them and try to do things. And the reason why is to improve the life of the higher beings, right? That was the reason why the High Evolutionary was doing what he was doing. He was trying to build the perfect society, the perfect being, the perfect everything. That was his thing. He wanted everything to be perfect. Thus, you see a lot of, and I think it does. It kind of symbolizes what humans do nowadays. I mean, obviously, we experiment on rat. I mean, see, we just think of them as rats, right? But I'm sure if we were able to communicate with the rats out there, they would be like, "Hey, we don't like that. We don't like being taken and you just start injecting us or whatever." But that's what we do. It's the whole. I think with the High Evolutionary, he symbolizes us as a society, us as the human beings, and
And just as our cruelest, because the moment
exactly,
that he finds no use of it or he sees just one imperfection, like, okay, just destroy it.
exactly. See, and that's where I think it's kind of the High Evolutionary character. As much as I hated him, or you got mad at him, and he stirred you up, kind of like in wrestling when the heel steers you up, right? You're really stirred up. I felt he kind of put a mirror in front of us, like, hey, this is what you would want. This is what you would do. You would experiment to try to make other humans better. You would get the rats, you would get all these smaller animals. Well, he felt these raccoons were small animals, and thus,
But at the same time, I think in his
mhm.
case, why is he doing all of this? Is it to actually make life better, or is he doing this just because he likes feeling like he's a god?
I think the second part,
See,
because
that's the thing. Where's his motivation? Why is he doing it? Is he actually somebody who like I said, you look at Thanos, you look at his method, you look at what he did. End of the day, I'm not saying he was a good guy, but at the end of the day, his motive was, I wanted to bring balance to the universe. Whereas High Evolutionary, much like, Kang, it was all about himself. It was all about his ego. I want to be in control.
Exactly. And so we agree in the sense that the High Evolutionary, as much as he tried to make it that, oh yeah, I want to have a perfect society for everybody involved, it was about him. At the end of the day, you saw it was about him. So to me, the High Evolutionary character was really interesting. And like I said, I felt it was kind of a mirror to some folks that actually do think that way. It's kind of again, not to get too deep, and we won't get so deep in this, but kind of how some people in society feel what a perfect society would be. See, and we'll just stop it at there. So we don't need to dive into deeper issues, but
I beg to differ. There's actually a lot of deep issues in
there
this
are
movie. There are
a lot of deeper issues involved here. But just again, I think we could just, we could stop it right there on the fact that if we get too deep, it'll turn, we want to talk about this movie. But basically, I think the High Evolutionary symbolized what society sometimes feels. There are certain people, and you just said it, Marv. Was he doing it for the betterment of society, or was it doing it for himself? And there are people out there, again, we don't need to dance down this road. We'll just leave it at where it is, that ego does come to a play, and they do feel godlike. They feel it is their responsibility, that they need to build that perfect society. And I'm the person to build that perfect society. See, so I think the High Evolutionary character, like I said to start off with, is kind of a mirror to certain people in our own society that we're living in. Okay? You're listening to the Everyday Nerd podcast. That was Joss along with Marv, and great discussion about how the movie involved friendship and family and relationships. And I liked how both of you touched on it. The one thing I do want to dive into right now are the characters within the movie. And first off, we already talked about the High Evolutionary, but the ones that were working with the High Evolutionary, the recorders, there were two recorders. And if you've seen Superstore.
Yeah, the Filipino guy.
Yes, the Philippine, we have representation again. Nico Santos was in it. So he was recorder Theo, and then the other one was recorder Vim. So the two recorders were there. They were the ones that were helping the High Evolutionary with his goals and his plans and everything. Now we talked about Rocket's origins, and Josh, we were having the discussion about the whole treatment of animals within this movie and what the High Evolutionary was doing. But let's talk about some of these characters that we meet with Rocket and what they end up being. When Rocket first sees Floor, he is just like, whoa, he's like really scared. And then there's the War Pig, and then finally there's Lilia, who
Lila,
I hope I'm saying the name correctly.
Lila, it's Lila Teeps and Floor, right?
Excuse me, Lila. Lila was, the comforting one to him, and that's why you kind of got the sense. And again, spoiler alerts on this, but the scene where it was pretty symbolic. The scene was very symbolic. The fact that, obviously his friends were killed through violence. And remember how he was being brought up, no violence, no hurting. And immediately he picked up that gun. And then we got to see what Rocket is now when it comes to his violence and his rage, is because it stemmed off the incident where his friends were basically killed in front of him. And yeah, again, that was a kind of an emotional scene for me, being that I'm an animal guy and everything. But those characters, those three characters.
I was going to add something, Lou. With those animals, and see how they were somewhat of a hybrid
Yes.
of different types of, I don't know, parts
Mm-hmm.
or other animals. It reminded me of Toy Story. I
Oh,
think it
okay,
was
yeah.
Toy Story 2 or 3,
Mm-hmm.
where they focused on the toys that were just, they were broken apart but then came back
Mm-hmm.
together again, and in its own creation, but
Yeah.
they were still worth something.
Mm-hmm.
They were also worth something. They were also, again, in that sense, a family within
Yes.
that, in that atmosphere. It didn't matter, if you however you look, you were still a soul, a personality. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, with those two movies, there was that theme of, we're just together. We don't have extended family, but
Mm-hmm.
we're all together. And so
Yes.
it did make, some really sad scenes when he did feel so guilty of trying to escape, and then this happened to all of them. But also there was already a rage with, with the, I call him the maker, but there's already this instance where he was planning on getting rid of them. He
Yeah.
had a plan. He already felt like he had no use for them. So
Mm-hmm.
in a way, that he was trying to get them to escape so they
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be part of his wrath.
Exactly.
It's just unfortunate that this is what happened, and that Rocket was able to escape.
Mm-hmm.
um and also when he came back and he found out there was like little baby raccoons, he
Mm-hmm.
realized, hey, I'm a raccoon.
Mm-hmm.
He also learned like who he is or what he is. And I thought that gave him a sense of closure too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you mentioned high evolutionary, as I said, this movie's about relationships. And when you look at the relationship between the high evolutionary and Rocket Raccoon, I can't help but think this is an abusive relationship. Because what do abusers do? They do all these terrible things to people, and then they say, I do it because I love you. I do this because I care about you. And the moment that the person gets abused, some shows some sort of superiority. In this case, when Rocket Raccoon displays that bit of intelligence where he realizes, hey, this is why your experiments are going wrong. That's when the high evolutionary looks at Raccoon. He's like, why are you smarter than me? I didn't create you this way. And
Yeah.
then he totally discards him. And then look what happens. The moment he needs something from Rocket Raccoon, guess who comes running back?
Yeah.
And I'm just watching that like, oh my, like I said, this is all about relationships and not just about
Mm-hmm.
the good ones and the bad ones. Um, I also what I also appreciate about this movie. With a movie with a big cast, I know part of the problem is there's always going to be the one character that doesn't get development. I kind of felt like everyone had some sort of development. And Josh, I'm hoping that you do go back and watch some of the first two movies, because I think at the end, Drax, or I admit I
Yes.
have a soft spot for Dave Bautista, another Filipino. But it's like I really like that moment. Was it Nebula or Mantis that told him, "You are not a destroyer, you're a dad"?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Because when you first meet him in the movie, he's this very angry character whose family was murdered by Ronan and Thanos. And then you see at the end, like, it's weird that you watch it throughout the series. You don't catch it, but then when you look at it in perspective, you realize, you know what? He just wanted a family. That's
Mm-hmm.
all he wanted. Um, and then, kind of going back to Lou and how
Mm-hmm.
much of he's animal lover, I'm wondering how you felt about Kraglin calling Cosmo, "You're a bad dog."
Oh yeah. See, I wanted to touch on that.
You know what's funny? I was kind of with Kraglin, because in Marvel Snap, Cosmo is the most annoying card in the game. So bad, every time I see her, I go bad dog. But how do you feel about?
Yeah, that was the thing. And the dog, what I loved about it was the dog was responding back like, "I'm not a bad dog. I'm not gonna tell you." And you kind of got a sense of that as being a dog owner, that my dogs, if I were to say that to him or her, they would probably be saying that back to me. Like, I'm not a bad dog. You take that back. I could totally see that happening. And I'm sure a lot of the other dog owners out there would agree with me that when you get mad at your dog, they usually do, they cower or whatever. But if they honestly feel that they didn't do anything wrong, they're like, wait a minute, I'm not a bad dog. That's great. But, I want to touch on Drax again, too. And yeah, Dave Bautista, I thought did an excellent job, and we will never see him do Drax again. He's made that clear. But what I find it now, and you mentioned it, how I believe it was Nebula, or it could have been, yeah, one of the two, or Mantis, who said, "You're not a moron. You're a dad. You're a father." I start realizing, and Josh, we recommended, like, you see some of the previous Guardians movies about Drax, you start thinking about, some of his jokes, they're kind of dad jokish now. If you really think some of the stuff he would do, and you kind of chuckle, but you realize that's kind of dad jokish now. And now it's funny how Nebula asked him, how did you know to communicate with them? And he just straight up goes, "You never asked." He's like, "You never asked. I know how to communicate with these I guess they're called what, Krylorian kids?"
Something like that.
Yeah, so he knows their language. And his answer was simple. Well, you never asked him. And that's why I think when they said, "Drax, you're a dad, not a moron," and I think that statement just holds true, because if you really think now, all the jokes when he was trying to be funny guy or whatever, they are, and now look at it, they are kind of dad jokish now, and he is. And like Marv pointed out, when we first meet Drax, he's on a vengeance because of his family being slaughtered by Ronan / and Thanos type of thing. So he wanted his family, he's a good family guy. And the fact that he stuck around with the Guardians, that tells you something. The sense of family is in this movie. And how they ended it too. So let's talk about that. How they had the meeting, the big meeting, where they're like, okay, well, Star-Lord's like, I'm done. He goes, I'm done.
What was the metaphor they said? He's like, I need to stop hopping from lily pad to lily pad. I need to start swimming.
Yeah, type of thing. I think it was something like that, if I recall correctly. But that meeting that they had kind of reminded me of the first movie when they all agreed that they were going to go up against Ronan. He goes, "I will stand with you," and they're all standing around. And Rocket finally just
look like a bunch of a-holes.
He goes, "Okay, now we're all standing." That's right. It kind of reminded me of that moment, which was kind of cool how they brought it back. They brought it back to a moment where they all had a meeting to discuss their future. And I liked how I thought it was a perfect ending to that core of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So obviously, again, spoiler alerts, that ended James Gunn's phase of handling Guardians, and I thought it was a perfect way for him to end his tenure with the Guardians and with the MCU. And again, also for Peter Quill, for Chris Pratt, for him to, okay, well, I'm no longer going to be the head of the Guardians. And again,
I don't think we'll get to post credits,
but we'll get to that. But just, as the Guardians, he's like, okay, I think I need to get all my, what is he? It's not Earth. What do they call him? Not an Earthling.
I don't remember.
Basically, he realizes he needs to be in touch with, I guess, his human side, his earthly side of himself. So
because he only went to Earth once, and that was to fight Thanos.
Exactly. And then the other time, I guess, was to free Kevin Bacon. Or no, he wasn't even involved.
No, he wasn't even in it.
It was Drax and Mantis. But yeah, so he realized that, I need to family. We talked about how this movie touches on family things and how he realized he needed to touch base with his own family on Earth, which was kind of cool. And it was kind of good seeing Nebula, how she became the leader of that area, how she evolved from the raging, mad, just the stepchild that Thanos was beating around, the unwanted sister, so I liked how and then Mantis herself, being, I guess, the caretaker of those big creatures, she decided that, hey, she was able to communicate with them and realize that no, they're not our enemies. And you
It
talked about it
reminded me of Starship Troopers when Doogie Howser touched the little
exactly,
alien. He goes,
yeah,
he's afraid. He's afraid.
yeah, totally does. But Joss, it goes back to your theme of what we perceive as trash or not good enough. And Mantis is now caring for these beings that look very scary, but she's able to, yeah, communicate with them and kind of, shall we, not control them, but just, help them out, lead them where they need to go. So again, all the themes in this movie was great about family, relationships, and Marv, you touched on it great about Gamora, how Quill, it took him to the end of the movie to realize that no, this is not the and I think also more than any, he realized he needed to let go of that Gamora that did die in
Mhm.
Infinity War. He realized that no, she really is dead now, and now he has to move on. And this other person is a Gamora, but not his Gamora, like we've established. So, let's
So
break that.
I
Yeah, go
oh
ahead.
wait, I have something to say. So,
Hmm.
since we're talking about the ending part, also we have to also realize that Quill, he actually handed the baton of leadership to Rocket.
Yeah,
And now, and also with Adam Warlock, which I have to be
yeah,
honest with you guys, I don't understand. Like, I remember him, he was like one of the end credits
Yeah.
of the other movie. And, now that we have him, it's like, I really don't understand this. However,
hmm
with Rocket now in charge, he is now spearheading I guess, the next generation of
exactly.
Guardians. And, you see this group. And um Rocket's now he's Quill was able to say, you know what, it's your turn. You're ready to do this. You're ready to, look after others and be the guardian, the head guardian, and to continue that legacy. And so I also again see, changing of the guards,
Hmm.
more character development,
Yeah,
and again with I hope we talk about Adam Warlock, because
we're
I don't
about to.
understand what is his what was his point.
Well, I
I
mean,
think
as it kind of mentioned,
Yeah, go ahead.
he kind of is a character that had to be birthed. It was, oh God, I'm trying to remember. Do you guys remember Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2?
No.
The one with Ernie Reyes Jr.
I remember Ernie Reyes Jr. Yeah.
So they mutated the warthog and another animal, and then because they mutated them too early, they were babies.
Hmm.
So it's, in a way, it's kind of the same thing. He came out of his cocoon too early, so he doesn't have the consciousness of an adult yet.
Yeah.
Which is weird because in the comics he does become this ultimate cosmic being who eventually wields the Infinity Gauntlet. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know if he's gonna there if he's there. I mean, well, like I said, we'll get into post credits, but who knows if he may grow into the becoming the what? Maybe he's going to be another character that we're going to see grow.
I think, since we're touching on, Adam Warlock, he was a character that, yeah, if somebody like Joss is like, well, who the heck? I remember you were an end scene character, but what's your significance? And wow, you come in tearing it up in the beginning of the movie. I mean, he came in there. He's the one that basically took Rocket out, and took them out. But then, they were able to, subdue him because of his immaturity, because of how he is. And in a way, again, we talk, and then we might as well touch on it a little bit. What was cool about Quill passing over leadership to Rocket, it reminded me of the scene in Infinity War where Thor's like, well, who's the leader? And Rocket goes, well, I'm the captain. He goes, no, 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 I'm the, and in a way, Josh, you kind of touched on it. Quill finally said, you know what? No, you are the captain now. You are going to lead these people. You are going to lead the Guardians now, which was kind of very similar, like a passing of the torch thing, which was very symbolic there. And of course, let's talk about the mid-credit scene where,
Before we do that,
yeah, okay.
there's one bit that there's a lot of analysis going on, and James Gunn confirmed it online.
Uh-huh.
It's when we finally hear Groot say, "I love you all."
Yes.
Oh yes.
Because as an audience, we're over here saying, wait, can he finally say different words now? But this is what James Gunn confirmed. He still said we are Groot. He said that. But because we as an audience have been with the Guardians for so long, we can finally understand what Groot is saying.
Oh, so thus we heard an interpreted.
Yeah, we heard him say we
Groot.
love you all,
Okay.
but he really said I am Groot.
Yeah, he said I am Groot.
Just like how, Nebula, remember this version of Nebula still hasn't hung around Groot. It's like, I don't know what you're saying, but then by the end of the movie, she finally hears it.
Yeah.
Because she's been around for so long. So
You know,
in a way, that was kind of our indicator of, okay, we've been with Groot for so long that we find, like I said, it's weird. Even our relationship with Groot as an audience, because we've been with this character for so long, we know what he's finally saying now. So that was a good piece of filmmaking there.
Yeah. And what's interesting, even like this version of Gamora goes, I know you're Groot. It's like, you just say that. And it's like, he's just saying that, right? And then you're just making that up. And I love how they subtly put that out there. How she's like, no, you just say whatever. You guys are just making up whatever he says, right? Which was kind of cool how, and you touched on it earlier too, Joss, about the fact that when she was in the ship, and I don't think it was more of that she was remembering who she was. I think she was understanding why they're going through all of this just for this raccoon. Say, her whole thing was about survival. And it's like, wait, let's get out of here. And it's like, no, we can't, because we're here to save our friend. And initially she's looking at, it's just some raccoon. Why do you care? And then I think by that point where she saves Rocket, and she saves, Adam Warlock too, is the fact that she started to understand the relationship that they have with each other, and how they're accepting. They're kind of like misfits, and this is a group of misfits that she's starting to understand that. Well, they all work well together, and even Adam Warlock with this group, and obviously he lost his mother when when the High Evolutionary was destroying his creation because he felt it wasn't perfect. And before we touch into the mid-credit scene, I think that was kind of symbolic in a sense that he was willing to destroy everything to try to get it perfect again. Yet at the very end, when again, and it was symbolic, pull the mask, he wasn't perfect. It just showed he wasn't perfect. So I just think it was, that was totally symbolic in how we run into, get back to that deeper thought. We run into society of people that think certain ways of how society should be, or their goal or perfection, or what they think should be this or that. You pull the mask and you see, well, you're not so perfect yourself. So
there's one more comment. Was it me, or did you all get vibes of Pee-wee's Big Adventure when they saved all the animals at the end?
I didn't see it, but I kind of thought it was from something.
You never seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
No, I didn't, but I kind of got it. Yeah.
It's one of Tim Burton's best movies. Like, there's a scene where Pee-wee he runs into a burning pet store and he saves all the animals. Pet store,
and then all the animals are let loose.
Yeah, and he got the snakes too.
Yeah. Well, see, and I think that's kind of symbolic of, again, the Rocket origin story, and again, what we talked about earlier, Marv, about animal lovers and everything, how we're gonna save every animal, no matter how they are, and what Joss even said, whether they're this or that, we're saving every animal. And they even said, they go, whoa, we're getting more than what we what we asked for here. And then sure enough, and that's why at the end, which was really cool, they brought it all back when Rocket goes, you know what, I'm gonna play something here. And he played the song that started us all off in this Guardians adventure. And that was really cool, and kind of, and not with a dance off, but just, not the sad crying ending, but I like it. It was the, hey, we're all doing our thing, but we're all, we're having a good time doing it. So that's kind of cool. So I guess we'll talk mid-credit scene now. So we just touched on a little bit that I think the mid-credit scene had to have been, I'd say maybe a couple of years, at least a year or so after the ending of the movie. I would think. I would think it'd be maybe not like a month or two later. No, because you got to remember who was in that little group now. So you have one of the Krylonian kids who was developing her powers. You obviously have Adam Warlock. You have
You have Groot still.
Groot.
was still with them. Was no Nebula was not with them, right? Nebula was not there. I don't believe
Nebula
Nebula was
wasn't
there.
there.
Nebula, because Nebula's
It's
leading.
Rocket, Groot, Adam Warlock, the little girl, and Cosmo.
And
Kraglin.
Kraglin was there. That's it.
Okay. And Cosmo was there too, right?
Yes, and Cosmo would be there too. So yeah,
Okay.
so there's your new group of. There's your new Guardian of the Galaxy, and it was kind of cool. You know, they were telling stories, kind of sitting back, telling stories and everything. But what I find about that one is James Gunn, in a way, kind of did the whole, well, here's how I'm going to end it. And you folks, if you want to do anything with this,
This is
here
your
you go.
team.
This is your team. I see possibly a Disney Plus show out of that now, possibly, because I could see them obviously, you know, if you look at the cast, it's not Chris Pratt, it's not Zoe Saldana, it's not Dave Bautista. So all the quote unquote big names are gone. I know it's Bradley Cooper still and Vin, but I think you can get anybody to voice Groot. But yeah, you see Alan, but then see that's interesting with Sean Gunn being in that group. See if he would still come back to do a role or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I'm sure he could still because he's not James, he's Sean, so he could probably go back and forth if he wants to. But I totally see a Disney Plus show out of this where they could just, you know, we could do more stuff with the adventures of Rocket, Groot, and this, and then we could see that development of Adam Warlock. And it's interesting that he's going to be developing with Rocket as his captain. So I'm just curious how that's going to work because, you know, I know Rocket at times is Mr. Violent, you know, let's handle it this way. But I'm sure by then, you know, he realized, well, not everything needs to be killed off or solved with a gun.
Like I said, he eventually, if they go kind of close to his comic origins, he grows to be this very wise and omnipotent cosmic being who, like I said, he becomes Adam Warlock.
Yeah. See, so
as I mentioned, he becomes a wielder of the Infinity Gauntlets. I don't know if they're gonna come back, but he's kind of a big deal in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, and I'm thinking right out of the chute, he's another quote. Here we go with the air quote again. Young character, you know, that's in development. So it could be with all these other young characters that we're seeing through Disney Plus and all the MCU right now. Young Hawkeye, young Miss Marvel, a young, you know, Ironheart, you're seeing pieces. They're giving you pieces, and like Marv and I talked about earlier, Joss, you know, maybe some folks are fatigued with the comic stuff, but if you slowly introduce these characters, and again, I think it's all about the storytelling of you introduce this character. Initially, you may, it's like, I guess the best way I could think about it be like if you're drinking your first beer and you don't like the taste, you're like, ugh. But then after a while, you start, okay, that's what I expect when I drink that. And then it kind of comes together. So again, I think with Adam Warlock, we're definitely going to see him in place. He's too strong of a character that they're just going to shovel him off to the side. So I expect to see Adam Warlock to be a part of future endeavors in the MCU. So,
and another character who I'm surprised we're going to see in the future again, the legendary Star-Lord.
Yep, exactly.
Post credit, of course, it's always the second post credit is kind of like the more comical and non-consequential one, where you just see him kind of now just living the Earth life, and you see he's like, he gets to go. So like, this is what living on Earth is like.
I gotta mow the lawn. What?
Yeah. But then we have that caption in the end: legendary Star-Lord will return.
So I think for him, maybe he's also a Disney Plus show, or maybe we'll see him in one of these MCU movies where, you know,
I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes a member of the Avengers.
Yeah, I think eventually they'll go, you know what, we need. Oh, hey, let's get. He goes, his resume. Hey, I did take on Thanos, right? He'll be the guy that will throw his resume out there. He'll be the first guy to say, because I think he'll be so bored living regular life that he's gonna need some of that quote unquote action. So I could totally see him being in a future Avengers movie or any one of these MCU movies or shows that take place on Earth that deal with everyday life, and it's like, oh, hey, there's Peter Quill.
It's funny because it's sorry to talk about my personal life, but my
Yeah.
dad, when he finally retired from his job a year into his retirement, he got bored and he found
Mm-hmm.
another
Yeah.
hobby because people are so used to that grind. They're so used to
Exactly.
it. But the moment they get out of it, they go, I want to go back.
Yeah, or I need to do something. So you're listening to the Everyday Nerd podcast. I'm Lou P. It's Marv and Joss, and we're summarizing everything we felt about Guardians of the Galaxy and its the whole trilogy, how our thoughts on on Guardians of the Galaxy 3, how it ended. And of course, now it's time to talk about the man behind the Guardians of the Galaxy, Mr. James Gunn, who, which is interesting, guys. He for a while there was, shall we say, not expelled or suspended from the MCU because of old comments he made on Twitter, but then they brought him back and things like that. But now, as far as James Gunn is concerned, he's left the Guardians franchise in the MCU totally to pursue his career now in Warner, which would be the DC extended universe. And I liked how he ended the Guardians. He kind of like what we talked about earlier. He kind of set it up for the next person. Like, hey, here it is. You guys want to run with it? You guys could do whatever you want with it. So, but at this point, we're talking about James Gunn. And what's interesting about James Gunn is that first of all, he did a little cameo in the movie. I don't know if you know the character Lamb Shank.
Which
He
one's
was
that?
Shank, I think. So he was one of those costume guys in there.
Oh, okay.
And obviously, much like what's her face from the Wonder Woman movies, he had one of his kids was in it, as well as his brother Sean's kid was in it. They were one of those Krylonian kids.
Uh
So their kids were in it. So that's kind of nice. Again, we talked about the sense of family. So the movie was done with family. But now we're going to talk about James Gunn and what he's going to be doing now over at the Warner Brothers. And I find it interesting. We touched on it earlier when it ever came to James Gunn and the DC universe. Is he basically has to come in, and he's come in and basically said, okay, we're going to kind of scratch everything off the board. We're kind of taking everything off. And he has his vision of what he wants to do now. He goes, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And what's interesting is that a lot of folks ask questions. Well, what about that Batman movie or what about that Joker movie? How does that fit into what you want to do? And he summed it up by saying, well, those movies would be considered Elseworld universe, while the stuff that he is creating is going to be a different,
it's gonna be the new canon.
the new canon. And what's interesting, and we briefly touched on it, and now we're gonna hit it. Um, Obviously, it's gonna be springboard next month with the Flash movie. The Flash movie is gonna be the movie that launches his whole, and you could see why the storyline. You could totally see what's gonna, and that's great. It's a perfect setup to launch. It's a launching point for that whole universe. Again, though, the issue that I have, we'll talk about it, is Ezra Miller as Flash, and we even mentioned in previous podcasts about Jonathan Majors, how he is set for life if he won't do any. All you need to do is follow the law
Just
and
behave.
set, behave. You're right. Just behave. And now look what's going on with him. The Ezra Miller deal, in case some of you don't know, look it up online. There's just too much of that. And what I find interesting is that obviously, they canceled a lot of and they've taken out a lot of the projects that were initially up, that Warner had Gunn came in and his partner or the one he's with, they came in and just said, nope, we have this other vision, and they're now taking into a new direction, which I think needed to happen. And what Gunn is doing, I think, is setting up DC to be better than what we've seen already from them. And again, I'm going to open the discussion to the panel here with Marv and Joss, but just my opinion coming into this. First off, I cannot see the Flash opening weekend. I will not be a part. This is going to be my quote unquote boycott. I will not be part of the first weekend box office take for that movie. I will see the movie though. I will see it, and most likely we will do a podcast on it. We'll talk about the movie. But me personally, I need to take a stand about the Ezra Miller deal. I just, it's come on. My thing is just come on. But I understand you spent millions, and this is your primary storyline that you're launching your universe on. Okay. And again, before I let you guys talk, this could be a great movie. The Flash movie could be a great movie, and it looks like it could be. But again, I cannot participate in the first weekend box office. I will not give them my money for that. And just the fact that who knows? And I'm already anticipating there's going to be a lot of negative reviews again, that automated negative review stuff. But again, as what we've told people who watch and listen to our podcast, we leave it up to you. We're not saying you should or shouldn't. If you watch, like for instance, I'm sure some of you folks are wondering, well, where's your Shazam podcast? Well, okay, that sums it up. That's all you need to know. That sums it up. Okay.
So I think Shazam is now on HBO Max.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
Yeah. See, look at that. Look at the reaction from the fans. Look at that. So again, for some of you folks wondering, where was our Shazam podcast?
I didn't. I chose to watch John Wick instead.
There you go. And there you go. So
I was watching Bridgerton, Queen Charlotte.
So there you go. That answers your question for some of you folks that are writing us going, you guys didn't do a Shazam one. Well, there you go. And now I open it up to the panel. As far as the future of James Gunn, looking at it, reading what I've read, it looks like at least he has the ship in a right direction. Now, again, it's kind of unfair that, the Flash movie could be this great movie. And with the storyline that we potentially know about the Flash, this is definitely going to be the jump point for all the stuff that they're going to do. And it could be really good, really creative. I open up the floor to you guys. Marv, I know you got a lot to say. Go ahead.
I'll let Jocelyn, if you want to go first, you can go ahead.
So a couple things I'm just thinking about in terms of, like I said, I haven't been reading so many articles because I don't watch, I don't read the spoilers. I try to go with everything with an open mind, like for the whole Guardians thing. I didn't know what to expect. And I like doing that because I like to be surprised. Right. So I really just discipline myself not to read articles. However, I can say that based on the trailer, I would be excited and interested to see, are we taking off from the multiverse? In the DC. Michael Keaton, I love the fact that he's in this movie. So if he's going to be using characters that we can connect with, I'd be all for it. I don't have any expectations. If this was the Guardians was the last movie he just directed, then great. But I can't recall what other movies he directed for me to remember. But honestly, I'm just going with it with an open mind. Ezra Miller, I'm not a psychiatrist, but my sense is that he could be bipolar, with his manic state and stuff like that. But that's just my thing. But it's a very interesting. He's got an interesting lifestyle, but who knows, right? Who knows? I kind of wonder, like, are we still gonna have like our main superheroes? Who could that be? I've seen different articles of who could replace Henry Cavill. Um, I don't know, guys. I'm just really gonna look at this just very, with an open mind, and if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't.
Yeah, well,
Um,
that's go
as
ahead.
far as the Flash movie, not so much as a protest thing like Loopy, which I totally respect.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it. I don't know if I'm gonna make it a priority to watch it the way I make the Marvel movies a priority. Um, the trailers are exciting. I'm curious to see what the direction they is, but it's clear that the Flash movie is basically look like it's going to
Point.
be the end of the other DC movie stuff you've seen prior, which is like Wonder Woman and Man, basically the Snyderverse stuff,
Right,
and
right.
onto this new phase, which will be the James Gunn stuff. Now, okay, so for as far as James Gunn overseeing the entire vision of the DC movies, I'm excited. Um, there's a lot of titles that he announced that some of them are a little off kilter, but there's one title in particular, and it's not a popular title, but it's called The Authority. It's a comic book that came out in the early '90s, and I often tell people what comic books brought me back to reading comics. It was The Authority in the early '90s. This was basic. They look like a Justice League spinoff. I mean, they have characters that are like Superman and Batman, but what I like to call them, they're the proactive superheroes where they attack problems before they happen. They'll go after corrupt politicians. Um, they will go after like the basically they and you know what? They'll kill people who need to be killed. Um, and it's not definitely not in like a like I said, it sucks because we have this Snyderverse that tells us, oh, our superheroes kill and try to make it a cool thing. Whereas when this book came out, it kind of meant something. Like they got rid of the people that that really needed to go, and they weren't trying to make it a gimmick. So I'm excited for that one. But not only is he spearheading the vision of the DC movies, they did announce that he is also writing and directing the Superman,
Mhm.
which I have to admit I'm kind of half and half on. On the one hand, if there's one complaint I have had with the current Superman slate of Superman movies we've seen, they seem to have forgotten what that character was about. Um, they tried to make him into this dire emo character. Oh, I have to destroy him. I have to kill Zod and all that. Um, if I could count on a creator or director to get to the heart of it to make me care about him, it's James Gunn. I mean, he made me care about a character named the Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad.
Oh, okay. Now I remember what he did.
So he's able to, he's able to do that. He could, and same thing with the Guardians. When the Guardians came out, they were characters that nobody knew about,
Mhm.
but he made us care about them. My issue is James Gunn has a very particular style of directing. I'm not sure if it fits with a character like Superman. I don't need Superman to be quirky. I don't need Superman to have an 80s pop soundtrack throughout the movie. He doesn't need to be like a pop culture junkie. That's not what he's about. This is Superman is the and one thing that I think Superman is the person we all want to be. You know, for an alien, he best personifies the best of humanity. And that's what they need to get to the heart of. And I could trust James Gunn to get that, but man, don't give him a Walkman full of the Go-Go's and Tears for Fear. Please don't do that. Give him the epic score that he needs. Give him, I don't know, I doubt we're going to get John Williams to. I think John Williams is actually retired from making music for movies, if I remember.
Yeah.
Get, who's actually a good composer is if hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, Michael Giacchino. He did the music for Lost. He actually did the music for Spider-Man No Way Home. He actually
Mhm.
did the music for The Batman.
Mhm.
Oh, he also did the music for Up. And so when I think of Up, I think of that beginning sequence where they tell that story of Ellie and what Carl Fredricksen and
Mhm.
that score. Like there's no dialogue. You just hear the score and it's telling the story. And you know, he would talk about scenes that made me cry. That entire sequence. Sorry, I know we're talking about, but he's a good composer. So, like I said, and I don't know as far as like James Gunn shepherding. Like I said, I could trust him to get to the heart of these characters, but his vision doesn't fit with all the DC characters. His movies don't like Batman doesn't need the Suicide Squad treatment. The Authority, please don't. Like I said, don't. Okay, James Gunn, we know you love music. We don't need it's like that. It's like that girl on Facebook who only posts about her boyfriend. Okay, we get it. We get it. Come on, talk about something else. Show us different. Show us range. But like I said, it can work for something. But the '80s pop soundtrack, please give Superman the epic score it needs.
I wonder with this Superman movie. They're saying he's, I guess, whatever time period. When I say time period, meaning time in his life, where they're going to start it, because it's not going to be the origin story again. We're not going to see Krypton exploding and all that stuff. I don't think, but again, you talked about scores, and oddly enough, I was just driving around listening to the John Williams Superman score just now. Another person who I think does excellent is Hans Zimmer. He's the one who did the Dark Knight.
Oh yeah, I think he's too much tied to Christopher Nolan. I don't know if he.
See, that could be the issue, but hey, if somebody gives him a paycheck, guess what? Oh yeah, I'll do it. And yeah, maybe not so dark. Again, you're right. I really.
Or I wouldn't mind Danny Elfman.
Yeah, and then Elfman again, but I agree with you. I really don't need the dark Superman anymore. We don't need that. We kind of, I mean,
that's why it's funny when those movies were coming out. I mean, granted, let's not talk politics, but during the 2000s, 2020s, there was a period of dark time where we don't have great representatives of people, and we're like, this is the perfect time for a Superman movie to come out. We need to show what the best of humanity is. And I'm like, this was the perfect time to do it, but they just didn't do it. And like I said, just get to that. Show us the best of Superman. Show us what, the Christopher Reeve Superman does it best. That's who we want to be.
So. I agree. So we just got to trust that James Gunn knows what he's doing. See, so again, if it turns into we're hearing Tears for Fears, Depeche Mode, Duran Duran through the whole movie,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm hoping you're right, Marv. I hope he's really, I mean, here's another great film director that does do a lot of music in his movies that really is, you don't really stop to think about, is Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
A lot of Scorsese movies has a lot of music, and you don't really know about it. You don't really pick up on it until you see the scene, and does the song go with the scene type of thing. So if he does it like Scorsese, who he does 80s music a lot, but you don't notice it. It's within the scene. It's
and then you watch a movie like Kundun, which has none of it. So, yeah. But at least Martin Scorsese he's the kind of director who's aware. Okay, this movie doesn't call for Lowrider, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Or if it does,
it doesn't need a Rolling Stones song in the trailer.
Yeah, I mean, again, if whatever Gunn does decide to do with the Superman movie, you're just gonna have to. At this point, we're just gonna have to trust him. And again, the way I look at Gunn, he's looking at how Snyder did his, okay, and obviously dark and all that stuff. He wants to flip that. He may take some of the good ideas from that, but he doesn't want that. He wants to flip it to his own identity of Superman in the Superman movies.
So one thing I want to say is that when we're talking about the directors, I also don't want who directed the very first Justice League, the one that was somewhat campy. Who did that?
That was Zack Snyder. It was Zack Snyder, but then Joss Whedon came in.
Yeah, Joss Whedon.
The first Avengers movie.
I didn't like that one.
Well, I think part of it is the movie was already filmed. He just came in to finish someone else's vision. That's totally different from coming in with your own vision straight away.
That one, I'll give Whedon a pass on that one.
Even
Man,
despite of what we've heard about him backstage, behind the scenes, despite all that, he wasn't working with his own vision.
Yeah.
See,
So
so
I'm good.
so well, all we could do when it comes to James Gunn going forward now is just try. I mean, I'll admit I like what I'm reading, and like you said, Marv, if he just kind of here's the project, get out of the way of it. Who
Like I
knows?
said, just
Maybe
stick to the heart of it. It's like you already have something, you're already good at something. Just stick to that.
because in my opinion, if it's done correctly, Warner Brothers will start making some noise against Disney. And
Yes.
Disney will start making noise so much so that Disney will notice. That's what I mean. Because
at the end of the day, competition makes everyone better.
yep. Mm-hmm.
You can't have Pepsi without Coke. You can't have Marvel without DC.
And just again, going back, bringing it all back to my little protest of Ezra Miller. And I want to make this perfectly clear about Ezra Miller. It's not, I'm not protesting his lifestyle and it. No, 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 no. What I am protesting or giving my little thing about is the fact that, this guy has done some very questionable, what he's done against the law. There. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to talk about his personal choice. That's fine. I'm cool. Whatever. That's what makes you happy. That's cool. And like Josh says, I think he possibly does have some bipolar issues, some mental issues. And hey, good luck to you. Stuff like that. But again, just as far as the criminal aspects of what he's done, that's what I'm opposed to. And that's why, again, I will see the movie, but I'm not going to do first weekend. I will not. That's my little protest on it. Because the whole time I was thinking, am I actually going to watch this movie? Do I feel that strongly about what Ezra Miller has done in the past? Again, it's his actions, not his lifestyle. Let's make that perfectly clear to anybody who's listening and starts commenting, "Oh, you're anti." No, 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 no. That is not it at all. But again, this movie is going to be an important movie for the whole thing. Okay, that it's obvious because if this movie fails, oh man, they're in trouble. They're really in trouble. So that's why I'm anticipating it may not be as big as say Avengers, but I'm thinking it could potentially be as big as maybe the first
It
Iron
just
Man movie.
needs to be.
Yeah,
It just needs to be big enough.
exactly. And like I
They
said,
don't need to set. They don't need to
break
make any
records
big
and all that.
waves. Just make
Yeah,
enough your interest
Make
is
an
peaked.
impact. You want this movie to make an impact.
Yeah, but they don't
exactly.
need to make Avengers Endgame money right away. You
Yeah,
just got to
no. Just
make people invested.
exactly where they're interested that you can build up to a end game later on for you guys. But like I said, for now, build that interest. Like, oh wow, and like you said, Joss, you covered it. They're bringing in Michael Keaton, so the folks that saw Batman back in '89 go, oh, hey, Keaton's in here. Let me check that out then. And again, who knows? For all we know, Jack Nicholson is in here. For all we know, Christian Bale's in this. We don't. If they're doing this right, you never know that some of these characters may actually be there. And you do moves like that, you may generate that interest we're talking about that will sustain your interest for all your other properties that you will be releasing to the public. So, with that being said, let's wrap up with our what was initially our Guardians of the Galaxy 3 podcast, but we did discuss a lot from it, which is a good thing. And quite frankly, out of 10, I gave Guardians an 8.5. I gave it definitely an 8.5, because action was good enough. But again, for me, I guess because I've invested in the story that I liked how it was all finished off. So I give it an 8.5. Joss?
I am actually thinking just an 8.
Mm-hmm.
And where I compare it to the other Marvel movies that have come out, and so the way I gauge it is like, okay, I like it way better than Eternals, way better than Doctor Strange. I still think post I still think it's probably behind the WandaVision, Captain America, Winter Soldier. I think it's behind them. I don't think it's as high, but I give it an 8. I give it an 8.
I give it an 8 too. I think as far as post Endgame, me personally, there's something about Spider-Man No Way Home that I love.
Yeah.
That movie's gonna be like not just the movie itself, but the movie experience for No Way Home. It's just
definitely.
Wow. That I don't think I'm gonna experience that maybe until the Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars. That is if Jonathan Majors is still around.
Yeah, we will have a whole discussion on Jonathan Majors.
I was surprised. This movie did feel long though. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, oh wow, this movie's kind of long. But yeah. I mean, I thought it was a fitting closing to this version of the Guardians. I don't think that this is the end of Guardians of the Galaxy. We probably won't see some character. I hope I get to see my my Hollywood crush Karen Gillan back. She's my number one Hollywood. I know she's bald and wearing the makeup, but when you see her in the press, I just fall in love every time I see her.
Well, yeah, and I think honestly, so just some of these characters you'll see back because Lila was the voice of Lila was actually the lady who played
Hawkeye's wife.
Linda
Cardellini.
Yep. And the one who was War Pig, you're gonna love this. Voicing War Pig was Judy Greer. Okay.
She was Scott Wife's ex-wife.
Yeah, Scott Lang's
ex-wife in Ant-Man.
I'm like, can Judy Greer get something a little more? I think she's a pretty good actress. I'm like, I'm not saying she should have been like Scarlet Witch or Black Widow, but give her something a little more. It's just my opinion. I think she's better.
Marvel still, believe it or not, Marvel still has a library of characters that still don't have film versions out yet. They have a large library to mine from. Regardless of what people want or say, Marvel movies are going to be around for a while. As long as they have material to mine from, there's a lot. I mean, like I said, we still don't have Fantastic Four. Just with Fantastic Four, there's so many characters that we haven't seen yet. It's kind of like my problem with the Superman movies. We only see Lex Luthor. I'm like, dude, Superman has so many characters that we haven't seen. Same thing with Fantastic Four because we've only seen Doctor Doom, and Fantastic Four is way more than that. X-Men, oh my goodness, when the X-Men finally get introduced into more, make sure when they come back, we need to talk about that because
we will. Yeah, we definitely will. So with that being said, for you folks that have been listening or watching us, please hit the comment button. Tell us what we were right about or what we're wrong about, or your opinions on what you heard through our discussion. We'd love to hear from you folks. So just remember, hit the comment button wherever you're listening or watching us right now, and we'd like to know your thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Were we totally off? Were we wrong? Did we miss certain points? Just let us know. We'd love to hear from all of you that are listening and watching us right now. With that being said, he's Marv. That's Jocelyn. I'm your man, Lou P. Much love to GOC up there. And until next time, most likely,
is next.
The Flash we will talk about. So,
and I'm trying to convince him we could talk about the new Indiana Jones movie. So if you're interested.
I love Dr. Jones, but yeah, I think we will talk Indiana Jones. So we will be talking summer blockbusters when we can. So stick around for that. Stay tuned for that. We'll let you know when we will be yakking about some of your favorite movies or shows that you watch over the summer. So with that being said, till next time, peace.